Well, welcome once again to yet another healing conversation, which has come along much more quickly this time. And the reason for that has been twofold, really. One was that at the end of our last conversation, which we're sure that you've already listened to, Rachel dropped a little bombshell in at the end, which was lovely.
What?
Because mostly we talked in the last conversation about journey as a kind of illness that we can go through and then hopefully recover from. And so we're talking more in the context of our own recent bouts with getting really sick and then both recovering in our own time. And what you mentioned, Rachel, was that that isn't always how it plays out, and that sometimes we get into a more chronic state of illness or a stuck state, and there's no sight of recovery, and it becomes something that we have to adapt to or get used to or live with, certainly for a prolonged period of time, maybe for the rest of our life, who knows. And I know that the fact that you mentioned that resonated with numerous people. We both had people respond to that particular part of the last podcast. And one person took the trouble to write and share from her own experience and really ask the question, could you say more about this?
Mm.
Because that was very much resonant for her life and her own experience. So Rachel and I had a little brief chat about it and thought, well, maybe we can. And let's just open this one up as an exploration. The whole theme of chronic illness and what we might consider more chronic states, stuck states, where something fundamental has happened as regards our health, or it could also be just something that's come into our life and upended our life in some way. Then, we're basically been thrown off the track that we thought we were on. And at a certain point, it dawns on us that we're not going to get back onto the old track anymore. That
Mm.
there's a different requirement that seems to be necessary. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this one.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that I want to begin with saying is that one of the biggest things that causes suffering for people around this is a feeling that they've somehow caused it, or that they're somehow doing something wrong. And I want to just start by saying that that's really not true. And you can hear that sometimes in the spiritual world. And it's not a very spiritual thing to be saying that, someone, or they haven't done the work, they've got this because they do that. And to me, that feels very trite and very cruel, because it really adds insult to literal injury. When a person is unwell and struggling, the last thing you want is to then feel that that's happening because you are a failure. And I think we talked a lot last time about things that will help with that. But just to reiterate some of that, the sense that this is a journey that maybe we didn't feel we signed up for, that maybe hasn't come at the point in life when we were looking for something like that, but that is nevertheless here and is necessary. It's at some level part of our soul's journey. And our soul will often work through the mental realm or the physical realm or the emotional realm, and sometimes all of those, in order to communicate with us, so that this is where we will experience that journey. This is where we can most richly experience it, is through the very fibers and realms of our being. There is nowhere else to go. This is where we do it. This is where we live our life. And this is where things happen to and through us. So there's something that I think there's something about incarceration. I've been thinking about incarceration a lot recently. And one of the things that we can experience, I know I experienced when I was very ill for a number of years, was a feeling of being a prisoner in my body. And I think it's as bad as any prison because you seem to be free, but everybody else around you is doing all these things, has all this energy, has all this capacity, has all this vitality, and they are living this rich, full, interactive life, and you are not. And it feels like you're on the fringes of real life. It feels like you've been marginalized. It feels like you're just on the sofa or in the bed or in the house and not getting anywhere and not doing anything and not having the opportunity to really be thoroughly involved in life. And it would be easy to think then that this is all wrong and bad. But I think that there's different ways that we can be with illness, and I think of it as the 3 R's. So one of them is resistance, and in that I mean like really, really not liking this, just really full on resenting, angry with it. Why is this happening to me? A sense of deep struggle and fight, and not in any way accepting it. Now, that comes with a bit of a caveat, because one of the things that is known is that people who have cancer or heart disease or illnesses like this often are the ones who improve more quickly, or indeed improve, because they have this fighting spirit. So that isn't all bad. There's energy in that. There's a dynamic vitality to that. However, it can also cause a lot of suffering, a lot of stress, a lot of strife. Perhaps a worse state then is resignation. And by that, I mean real apathy, a sense of having given up, that there is no hope, there is nowhere to go. This is here, it's come, it's in my life, there is nothing I can do about it. And the person has completely given up hope. Both of those see this state, this thing that's in your life, that's come in, or that you were born with, or that you're growing into as you get older, as something bad that's happened to you. And what we pointed to last time was the possibility that this is not the only, or indeed the best way to see this. So the 3rd R would be receptivity. And we talked last time about surrender, about the fact that there's a point when at some point we've got to say, do you know what, this is what's here. This is what's in my life. And maybe if I'm not fighting it, or maybe if I'm not just lying down and let it steamroll over me, and I actually come in close, I come up to it, and I get curious, and I start to engage with it, I will see that it's a force I do not yet know, that is inviting me to live my life in a way I have no conception of yet, that will require me to find a depth of soul and self that I do not yet know. That it's a deep initiation into a part of our soul that we wouldn't otherwise find. And that for some reason, this is part of our path and our purpose in this world, in this life. So the incarceration in the body, what I came to see was that that was not happening in my body, it was happening in my mind. It was happening in my thinking. It was happening in the way that I was regarding this illness as something bad, something I couldn't do anything about, something that was happening at me, to me, but not choicefully. And when I began to see, no, this is where my life, this is the conversation my life is in at the moment. And I'm not really taking part in this conversation. I'm not really coming in and listening. I'm not really coming in and finding out what is going on and what this is about. And what might happen if I do? If I just drop in and gently start to listen, what might reveal itself? What might unravel here? What might this be that I do not yet know?
Yeah, I love that. And I think this, in the way that you express it, you're also making clear that that curiosity and that investigation or dialogue, if you like, yeah, into another way of relating to your experience, it has to be done gently, with softness and in a loving, in a compassionate way towards yourself. Otherwise, it becomes the source of more suffering. If it becomes another way to beat yourself up and pull yourself together and all of that, that's not it, is it? It's when I hear you talk about it, to me, it's much more of it says listening in and a willingness to just be open and curious and, as you said, receptive, so that you can actually let the body speak to you rather than just be telling it what you think it should be doing. Because I think there is that that intelligence, that wisdom, which is available to us, but we're not always available to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Very nicely put.
when there's just too much noise going on, or if we're in the mode of just resisting and objecting or demanding that the body does something that it doesn't seem to want to do, it's difficult for us to hear, that there actually might be something in this that's of value, perhaps, or that at least maybe in some way it's trying to get your attention. Maybe there's something you need to know here that would actually be really helpful to know. And perhaps this is the only way that it can be communicated. So I think there is that kind of transition from that resistance and rejection and hostility towards what's going on, towards a sort of and there's a difference between acceptance and resignation, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's not like we're talking about going into resignation and therefore giving up. I think acceptance, to me, speaks to acknowledging the reality of the situation in its current form, not arguing with reality, just actually recognizing this seems to be what's going on. It doesn't seem to want to clear up. Everything I seem to try doesn't make it go away. It's like really getting kind of real in that sense, and then getting curious from that place and being open to see it perhaps in a new way, the recognition that there might be some possibility in this that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah. I think it's also really important to say that that doesn't mean that we are going to feel all calm and spiritual about it all the time. It's also really important and necessary that we grieve, that we grieve the life we're not having that we thought we would have, or that we see other people having, that we do feel the waves of frustration when they come through, that we let ourselves feel, that's part of it too. That's a deep clearing out that's happening that will allow us to come more into alignment with what is. So, if you're having a day where you just feel absolutely crap about how crap your body and your life is, that is okay. Feel it. The best thing you can do is just lovingly let yourself go for it and feel it. And be in the experience of those emotions, because they are part of the energy and the movement that's going on and going through you. So we want to be looking for the signs of energy moving. I think it's never more important than in a chronic state, in something that feels stuck. We want to feel for where movement is. And one of the places we will feel movement is in our emotions. So we don't want to stifle them or suppress them or push them away, but to actually allow our body and ourselves to have that physical force come through us, who knows what that will do? Who knows what that will cleanse and realign and sort and sift? And who knows what that burst of energy will do to the patterns that are going on at a deeper level. So yeah, so this, I just wanted to kind of touch on that sense that we're not saying when we're talking about acceptance that you're in some Zen-like state all the time and you're just really like, yeah, I'm totally fine with having a chronic illness for the rest of my life. No, you don't have to be totally fine with it, but you're coming up to meet it as it's coming up to meet you in the moment. You're staying in responsiveness with it, and you are feeling where that movement is taking you, because whilst it feels like it's a fixed state, it isn't. The moment never is. Life never is. That's impossible. You are in something that has movement, and you do not know yet where it's going to take you. So the acceptance is that, yes, I will take the journey. The acceptance is, yes, I will go on this ride. The acceptance is that, yes, I will feel this energy move through me as it moves through me.
Yeah, I like how you broaden that out. The acceptance has to include the emotional, that component is so important. And there are many instances where that alone is the healing energy that was needed. I think, for example, when you mentioned the word journey, it made me think of Brandon Bayes, who some people will have read her book, which is called The Journey. And I trained with Brandon years ago, and her story was, on one hand, it was a story of physical healing, but the way that happened, that was a kind of secondary gain through what she came to see was that there was a whole bunch of emotional experience that she hadn't been allowing herself to have. That she'd kind of partitioned off a lot of emotions, and the healing really was allowing herself to really fully accept and fully feel whatever wanted to come, whatever was arising in consciousness. And she just went through a healing journey of kind of sequentially of different emotional states, and was subsequently physically healed almost as a byproduct of that. Seeing that those two things were actually part and parcel of the same process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things about another aspect of the deeper invitation, apart from this meeting ourselves and our feelings and what is with love, is the paradoxical thing about something that constrains us, an illness, a set of circumstances, something that feels incarcerating, is that it seems to me that there are times when our life shrinks in order for us to understand how big life is. That our world has to become much more limited for a time and smaller in order for us to comprehend the vastness. And, part of that is that sense of being brought to a place where we have to go within. And, I often think of the Waterboys song where they talk about, you stayed in your room and saw the whole of the moon. I went out and did all these things, but you stayed in your room and saw the whole of the moon. You saw something deeper by being in this small space. And we think that life's happening out there. Life is happening in here. That's where the vastness is. There is no constraint in here. And in a way, those things in life that point us back here very forcibly are really coming as a gift. They really are coming to ask us to step into something huge and eternal and beyond the body. But it isn't necessarily an easy transition to make when we are not seeing other people having to go through that or being placed in those kind of situations in the same way.
Yeah, something about this whole conversation, it reminds me of something I read in one of Joseph Campbell's works, and he was acknowledging his gratitude to Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche, who had a huge influence on him. And he said that one of the things that really it just completely turned around his attitude. Was he read in Nietzsche where he talks about something that he called the love of your fate.
Mm.
And it's that idea of basically whatever happens, what seemingly just happens to you that comes crashing into your life and, it upsets your schedule in some massive way. It's really, it's having the consciousness to be able to take the attitude, well, I don't remember ordering this, but this must be what I need.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what's here. This is what's shown up. It may look like a complete mess, but if you're able to approach it in the spirit of there has to be something in this for me, otherwise it wouldn't be here in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
And for Campbell, that was a real game changer. He just adopted that as part of his philosophy in life, and it's something that I've also adopted.
Me too.
Not
Yeah.
only in relation to physical health problems and so forth, but just in general, when life doesn't seem to want to go the way that you thought it was going to go,
Yeah.
something else shows up. What are we going to do? It's the same. We're going through the same stages each time, aren't we? That initial, what the hell, resistance and bitterness or, resentment for what you can't do that you thought you were going to do. And then realizing, well, this is just me hurting me.
Mm.
This is not particularly helpful or enjoyable. Is there another way that I can approach this? And there always is. It's just that we can't always see it.
Yeah. 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 That was definitely part of the change in my journey. I think the way that I saw it was I started to see that life was showing me through resonance what was good medicine for me, what would bring me joy and peacefulness and harmony and excitement and fulfillment in my life. I could feel the things that felt more juicy and I could feel the things that felt draining to my energy. And when I actually started to allow myself to choose those resonant things more and let go of those draining things more, then that had a big impact in how I felt in my being and how my life felt and how my body felt. But then there was another stage on from that, and I'm not sure whether I've talked about this last time or not, but this sense of it's not just what's resonant with me, but when I'm in a situation where I don't feel resonant with it, where it isn't what I want to have happen, then how do I come into resonance? How do I come into resonance with it? And that feels like something similar to what you're saying. It's like, how do I love my fate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are times when life is the way it is and we can't really fundamentally change that. There's something about that it's the way that it is. I mean, it might change at some point, but right now it isn't doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, whereas what you're pointing to is that the point of power is that we can change. We can be in a different relationship to it, whether it changes or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's powerful to realize that's always available to us. But that's also the thing that we can't always see. Yeah.
So there's also something about what's helpful. I think these things that we're talking about are hopefully helpful, but on a daily basis, what's helpful? And for me, I think that comes back to a healing environment inside and out. And so I guess how I would define that is if you were to think, if we could like create a healing sanctuary for someone, then I imagine that we would create somewhere that's really beautiful, really lovely, cozy building in a really tranquil, natural setting with beautiful food and people caring for you and lovely therapies. And it would just feel very safe and very harmonious and deeply settling. It's like it would give the soul room to breathe and to become more peaceful and feel looked after and feel cherished. So in our own living environment, how can we bring in some of the elements of safety and beauty and harmony and peacefulness? Is that possible to have even a little bit more of that? Is it possible to have a little bit more sunlight, a little bit more gentle movement, good quality rest, uplifting company, these kind of things that are really the pillars of a good life and are so much more important when we're not well. So it can be, I was speaking to somebody recently who was talking about, she's on quite a strict medical protocol where she's in and out of hospital and up and down the motorway, and she herself has realized that where she's at with her healing journey, the medication cannot do anything more for her. So what she started to understand when she really listens into herself is that those kind of environments, the motorway, the hospital, the waiting in the waiting room for hours and the delays and the traffic jams and all of that is not how she wants to be living these precious moments. It's not a healing environment. And the moment she saw that and made that decision, there was just like this huge weight coming off her and a sense of, oh gosh, I can actually choose to be having my days be different, following a different protocol, still looking after myself, but doing this differently. And that, I think we underestimate how big an impact beauty and tranquility has for us. And then there's the internal environment, which is the environment of us in our own psyche. And there are going to be times on the journey of ill health when we will be going into terrain in our own psyche that feels very difficult. We'll be going on the hero's journey and going through the valleys of despair and the deep dark forests. How can we be gentler with ourselves when that's happening? Can we be loving? Can we listen into a kinder voice inside ourselves or a softer feeling in our body? Can we just let ourselves off the hook, see that we're vulnerable, and take care of ourselves in those difficult times, on those harder days, when our mood is low and we're struggling? Can we meet ourselves with love? And the impact of that, again, speaking from experience, when I stopped being harsh and blaming of myself for being so unwell and started to think, well, maybe this vulnerable, broken creature could actually do with a break from me haranguing her. Maybe I can listen into something more loving inside myself and stay with that, and offer that, and meet what's coming up as that which is the most fragile and broken part of myself, and that which has not yet been met with love.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Rachel. I've got a quote here which I want to share with you. It's from Marion Woodman. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. For those who are not, she was a Jungian psychologist. She worked, I think, particularly with women, particularly women with anorexia and things of that kind, but not exclusively. Here's a quote from her. She says, "Many people can listen to their cat more intelligently than they listen to their own despised body. Because they attend to their pet in a cherishing way, it returns their love. Their body, however, may have to let out an earth-shattering scream in order to be heard at all."
And that is so true. I see that as being the heart of suffering in a chronic state.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. It's a good quote.
Yeah.
You and I were kind of, when we were just talking before we came on, I was kind of posing the question, does illness always equate to suffering or unease? When we have illness, does that mean that we then have to have suffering and pain. And I think that that is not always the case. You know, I think of lovely, wise spiritual teachers who, Byron Katie, Eckhart Tolle, you know, who have obviously got some conditions going on in their body that are painful and degenerative, and they are in, as far as we know, states of tranquility and harmony and peacefulness with whatever's going on in their body. So we don't have to be suffering. And when suffering is happening, it is resistance. It is us feeling something coming up in the moment that we don't like, and we're at some level trying to move away from it. And as we keep saying, the invitation is to come in towards it, to come in to hear that shouting, screaming body, just come towards whatever is going on in this moment and let the physical sensation of that be felt, be seen, be heard, move through, let the movement happen. It will take care of itself, and it will take care of us along the way, this energetic, responsive process that we're in as we come to meet it and wherever we come to meet it.
Yeah. And I think also for me, what I find helpful is, and I found this helpful when I was ill last year, which we talked about in the last episode, was allowing for the imaginal realm to inform that process. And whether that's in the form of dream or creative imagination, or so I'm really talking about the kind of intuitive, more right brain feeling approach, as opposed to the more left brain rational, you know, how do I figure out getting this sorted, which is how we tend to go about most things, you know, in the Western world, at least initially, until we find that it's not quite up to the job. So, you know, to me, what that leads towards usually is a recognition that we have to draw on something that's bigger than that, that's deeper than that, let's say, a richer field of possibility. And that to me points to the imaginal realm, and also what you can call the archetypal realm, and the mythical realm even, which, you know, why is that helpful? Well, one of the reasons to me it's helpful is because it gives you a sense that there's a bigger picture at play. You know, that there's something meaningful going on here, even if I don't understand it, or I can't really see what it is yet. I might be able to see it some time down the line, who knows? But right now I can't, but I can kind of get a sense that there is something purposeful behind this. Otherwise it wouldn't be happening. You know, it's just kind of again, opening to that possibility initially. And when I was reflecting on this after we agreed to have this conversation, one of the things that came to my mind as a kind of mythic image, it features in some of the stories that I really like, some of my favorite stories, one of which is the Parsifal legend, and which is one of the Grail tales, one of the Arthurian legends. And one of the characters, the Fisher King, he has what's called an amphotas wound, or a wound which will not heal. And to me, that's a powerful image, the wound that doesn't heal. And in that particular story, that it's a symbolic wound. You know, he has, I mean, in the story, he has a physical wound, which no physician and no medicine has been able to cure. So he's suffering, basically. But what it symbolizes also and represents is that being the king, being the monarch, he's also the channel, if you like, for the, or is the incarnation of the life force energy itself. So the whole kingdom is suffering as a consequence. Nothing is thriving, nothing is growing, as long as the Fisher King is unhealthy, let's say. And the healing of that wound happens through Parsifal's journey, the young knight, who is basically a fool. He's an innocent fool, which is what the name Parsifal means. And it's through compassion that the wound gets healed. He has to ask the question, what is it that ails the king, and he has to have a compassionate heart. And I love that, that actually is the redeeming feature in the story. He has to, this young innocent has to bring compassion into the equation, otherwise the healing can't happen. But I found another place where this theme showed up, which I'd just like to share with you. I'll just read you a little bit of this. So this is from Lord of the Rings, and they're on the way back after many an adventure. They're returning to the Shire, and Gandalf asks Frodo, "Are you in pain, Frodo?" "Yes, I am," says Frodo. "It's my shoulder. The wound aches, and the memory of darkness is heavy on me. It was a year ago today. Alas, there are some wounds that cannot be wholly cured," said Gandalf. "I fear it may be so with mine," says Frodo. "There is no real going back. Though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. I'm wounded with knife, sting, and tooth, and a long burden. Where shall I find rest?" Gandalf did not answer.
Mhm.
It's a very poignant, piece of the story, because he realizes he's coming back home, but it's no longer his home in that sense.
Mhm.
And because he's been changed, he's been transformed by the journey, and the ultimate healing is not to be found by going back. I think there's a period when they're kind of hopeful that it will be, and then there's a realization that, oh no, that's not the case. There's a further voyage that he has to take. He has to go west, I think, in the next next bit of the story, which again is a mythic image in and of itself. But I think there's some, to me, there's something powerful in that as well for us. To me, it speaks to sometimes that necessity to not just accept what is, like that dawning realization that this is something that maybe I just have to come into right relationship with. I'm not going to get rid of it necessarily. I'm going to have to find a way to live with this thing, whatever it is. And then in that acquiescence and that surrender, another possibility can emerge, but it may be a completely different life direction than the one that that you thought was on in the cards for you. And sometimes that is what informs the person's life. Like I think of someone like Frida Kahlo, who had a almost death experience as a young woman and was, crippled and severely wounded and injured and spent a long time in a hospital bed, out of which comes this outpouring of artistic wonder and creativity, which was part of her own inner healing journey, even though her body couldn't be fully healed. There was a powerful healing journey that happened. And I think that's often the case, that there's, as Jung says, there's gold in the dark if we can but find it. It's not always possible for everyone, but to me that possibility does exist, that if we can, there's a possibility that we can not only learn to live with some illness or some situation that can't be changed, but actually to transform it and to transcend it even, so that it becomes part of the fuel for what our life is, what our life is all about. I think also of like Beethoven going deaf, composer and as a musician, and he becomes profoundly deaf, and yet it doesn't give up. It spurs him on.
Well, he hears it all in his mind. He hears the whole orchestra in his mind and composes from there. Yeah.
And I know these are kind of, these are looked upon as kind of exceptions, people that Stephen Hawking would be another example. He was given very, very short, a prognosis of a very short lifespan, and yet something in him refused to accept that. And he had some work to do. And there was something about the fact that he brought this, this very disabling physical form to the field. It had an impact on not only on his work, but on the people that who he was working with and so forth. So to me, there's something about just holding that possibility in mind, that that there are other forces at play. There's always a bigger picture that we can't see.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And it speaks as well, that passage from Lord of the Rings speaks to the sorrow that we can feel, that we can experience for the loss of what was, and the fact that our destination, our sense of where home would be, is not anymore, that we have to find a different destination. I mean, one of the things I would say is, though, that that doesn't mean lots of seeking and striving for the way. It's not that. It's almost that, again, if we come back to this acceptance and surrender, that this new destination will find us. It will come through us. And I think that, you know, as you said, listening into the imaginal and intuitive side of ourselves, to our flickers of insight, is hugely helpful, and it's so practical. You know, on the one hand, just on a day-to-day coping with things, sometimes just to drop in and soften and feel what we're feeling yields an insight about something we can take or something we need to do next that would help us in this moment. And we're feeling our way sometimes step by step. At other times we have reprieve from that. It's less intense than that. But there's something about the question, what ails you? What do I need? What would help? What is ailing me in my spirit at this moment? And what would help with that? Because that's where we're on this vast journey. We're all asking that question. We're all in that inquiry.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. And again, bringing that compassionate heart, that tenderness.
Yeah.
You know, that I think there is something about that. Tending oneself, not just tending your cat.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, tend your cat.
Yes, don't neglect the cat.
But seeing that sometimes there's a gap between how we tend whatever it is, the house plants or the cat, and how do we tend ourselves, you know, bringing that compassion to ourselves. It's such a key aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and that internal healing environment, you know, an environment of love towards ourselves, a state of love for ourselves, a state of curiosity. It's enormously powerful. It is that which transmutes, you know, and it may not be that the ingredients of our life and the way that things are changes, but our whole experience of it can change massively just from starting to really listen to the love within ourselves and starting to respond to ourselves with gentleness and softness and love. There is nothing else that's required of us. And that's why, you know, for me, to come back to what we were saying at the start, this cannot be something you've done wrong, because all it is a deep, deep invitation to meet yourself with more and more love. How is that? How would that be something you've done wrong? If that's what this journey is.
Beautiful, beautiful place to end. Thank you, Rachel, and
Thank you.
I hope that there's been, again, something in this that resonates for you. And if there has, feel free to drop us a line, let us know. We always love to hear your comments and questions. And who knows, maybe it will spark an insight for a further conversation for one of you. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Bye for now.